I'm ready to start, and we'll wait for we're not going to wait for whoever else wants to come. They're usually about 20 or so, but they're late. I've got a few people in this room with me.
There's people coming.
And we'll say hi to everybody else after I am done praying. So hopefully they'll be quiet for a moment as they come on. Father, we are grateful again for another evening together. We get to spend around the Bible and looking at, hopefully looking at your word as well, the word made flesh, Jesus. So help us to see Jesus, help us to see our role, our calling in this world, help us to think deeply, to not be afraid of questions, to be stretched. We are looking for not necessarily answers, but we are looking for your guidance, your wisdom in our life, and how to understand this this crazy Bible that you've given us. And we ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Well, all right. It disappeared. Now I need to see everybody, not just me. There we go. All right. We've got Don and Karen. Nice to see you guys as well. And anybody on Facebook Live. All right. So let's rock and roll. We're going to do Cain and Abel today. Okay. So I had a lot of people after last week complain. I mean, gripe. No, whine a lot. Wait, the word is
Comment.
Offer constructive
comment about how much we need to go back over that stuff and look at it, because people had so many questions, and it was just a fire hydrant of information on beasts and humanity and what true human is. So we're going to do that. But we're going to do that next week, because this week fits into all of that. And so I want to review next week in big picture, but I want to kind of go forward so we can at least say we're done with the first 4 chapters of Genesis in some way before we get to Noah and Lamech and all the others. So here's the theme for today.
But before you do that, I'm going to jump in. If you have questions or want to interject, make sure and open your chat boxes and send them in the chat, and I will interrupt Chase just like I did. All right, it's all yours, boss.
He is good at interrupting me. He considers that to be his spiritual gift, and he's right. God has blessed him well in interrupting me. So throw the stuff in there, and hopefully he'll figure out about the best time to do that on. All right, so here we go. Let's talk about the theme. The theme of this text of chapter 4 of Genesis is, here's how I described it. We have met the enemy, and he is us. Okay? So when you're thinking this text is going to be about sibling rivalry, about farmers versus shepherds, about not killing people, okay, it's really something else that's going on. It's a story about Israel in miniature, okay, which is the same thing that was happening in the Adam story. So this is a next generation Adam story. Okay, so I'm taking you in a little bit, and then we're going to back right back out. But remember that the Adam story is an Israel story. So when you read the word Adam, you're supposed to be replacing that with Israel, because they're reading this from a much later time. We're going to get into all of that. Well, this is true of Cain and Abel too, only they're the next generation. So you can imagine next generation of Israel. Israel is wondering the same kinds of questions again after their forefathers have messed up. How will we move forward now? Okay, this is a constant theme throughout Scripture, right? Like, should we follow like our forefathers did, or should we follow what God has called us to do? That's what's going on. All right, but remember, we're going back to our movie dialogue to start us off with, because it's fun, and I have the chair, so I mean, you don't have the microphone. Travis will just cut you right off as soon as you start talking. So I am going to start again with, remember, we're talking about Star Wars. That's been the main theme that we've been going through here. And we've met the enemy, and he is us. Think about that kind of thing. So I think we can admit, and we've admitted over the last several weeks, that Star Wars has a lot of confusing things in it, right? I mean, there's some stuff going on there. Skywalker has this midichlorian count that is off the charts, but he seems to lose to everybody all the time. Like, How is it this guy keeps losing to everybody? He loses to Count Dooku, he loses to Obi-Wan, he loses to Luke, but he's like the greatest Jedi ever. And how good are the Jedi anyway? Because they always seem to get beat. All 3 Jedi go down in seconds in every single time that happens. Vader goes into the Jedi temple and somehow is able to kill thousands or at least hundreds of Jedi. How is that possible? Questions in Lucas's world. How come every planet has the same gravity? Has anyone ever tried to think that through? Like, that just seems kind of strange to me. Amidala. You guys know Amidala? At least the guys do, because she's like a hottie, right? So, like, what is happening with, like, she's elected to be the queen. Like, does that really fit? Are you a queen if you're elected? Is that what that position is? I don't think that's how queens work. And if so, would you really elect a teenager to be the queen? It makes sense if there's royalty and, you know, dad died and mom died, but you don't elect a teenager to be the queen. It doesn't even make any sense. And if she's elected and then she stops being queen, how come Leia is a princess? What's happening here? Princess Leia? I mean, come on. I'm sure you guys have answers to this. I'm sure Jeremy would have good answers to this if he was on here. Yeah.
Poland has an elected monarch.
Yeah. That's for sure. Yeah. And if, and let's just keep going here just for a second. If Leia's mom dies giving birth to Leia, how come Leia in the movies remembers her mom as sad? Right? I mean, maybe, you know, of course she was sad. Maybe she was dying. So maybe that's what she remembers. But as she was being born, she remembers my mom is crying because she's dying, giving birth to me. I guess that's sad. But all right, so let's just pretend that there are explanations to all of these things. Okay? Somehow that Lucas actually did rewatch all of the things. And you know, before creating the second 3. Here's a scene. Consistent, but confusing, because I was a little kid. I was 9 years old when I watched this scene for the first time. Yoda, we're on Dagobah, right? You guys picturing what's going on here, right? Yoda's there in Dagobah, and he's training Luke to be a Jedi. Luke feels drawn to this cave. Remember, there's this dark cave with all the mist and all that stuff. And Yoda replies, that place, and I'm not going to do it in Yoda's voice. I know you were all hoping that I would, but I'm not going to. That place is strong with the dark side of the Force, right? A domain of evil it is. In you must go. And Luke says, what's in there? And his answer is, do you guys remember what his answer is?
Only
what you take with you.
Only what you take with you. Nice job. All right, was that Todd and Travis
Yeah.
together? Of course it was Todd. Yeah. And Todd probably has about 1,000 answers to why all those problems in Star Wars that I just mentioned, but you and I will do that later, Todd. All right, so Luke picks up his utility belt with all of his cool Jedi tricks, right? And that lightsaber, he heads into the cave, and within a few steps, he's like face to face with Darth Vader, right? Like, this is the weirdest thing for me as just think 9-year-old, okay? He goes in there, Darth Vader's walking towards him, he pulls his saber, Vader pulls his, there's this battle, Luke slices off Vader's head, the helmet boom, 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 rolls down, you remember all of this stuff? And then boom, it explodes, and he looks, and he sees himself, right? He sees a picture of himself there. Now, I'm 9 years old. The scene confused the heck out of me. I think to this day, I think I figured it out at this point as an adult, but at that time, I just remember, what in the world has happened? The greatest villain ever was just defeated in a rather anticlimactic moment in a cave on Dagobah, where he shouldn't have even been. And then, why does he look like Luke? Because that kind of introspective world is kind of lost on kids, wouldn't you think?
You didn't really think of all that though when you were a kid, right?
I most certainly did. All I thought was, what the heck is going on? What is going on? How did all of this happen? So unless it's clear cut, you shoot this person, he dies. I have no idea what's going on. I remember showing this film to Davin and him going, like, what has just happened? Right? When he was younger. Okay, we need to understand. It's the same thing. Let's move off of that movie to Spider-Man. Remember Spider-Man 3, Tobey Maguire version? You guys with me on this one? remember the black costume? Was that Tobey Maguire? Yeah, the black costume. Like, it wasn't its own costume. It was basically his dark side, right? It was very different. It's supposed to be a symbiote, alien, all that stuff, but it was really just his own struggle with himself, the desire to do good and then the desire to do evil. And as adults, we get that, right? We understand what's happening in that kind of a thing. It wasn't till years later I began to notice this. So here's the question that we have, right? Do you have the same pull to the dark side? Is that a constant struggle for you? I'm sure as younglings, that's what they're called in Star Wars. I don't understand why they couldn't come up with a better phrase for little kid Jedis, but and I'm sure we can get it. There's this pull to the darkness. It pulls kids. They don't understand it very well, but it pulls them, but it pulls us every day as well. Constantly tempted to do evil. Yeah? To do the wrong thing. And this is Jesus's life too, constantly tempted to do the wrong thing. There's a battle within all of us regarding whether we will master the sin that is crouching at the door or whether we will let it win. Okay, we talked about this last week with the animals versus being a human. It's the animal outside that is trying to pull us into this animal-like behavior, this killing, this violence that comes with being an animal. So that's why I said this theme is we have met the enemy and he is us. And you're thinking, how does this have anything to do with the Cain and Abel story? Okay, that's what we're going to be here for. Here's Israel's story. Remember, we're going back in here. The nation of Israel has this dark side as well. Actually, we're not going back. We're going forward in time now. Has this dark side. It's like to be righteous. They understand the reason for their exile is because they didn't kill their own little enemies, their own idols, right? So prophets, false prophets told them to go their own way, and so they did. And in so doing, they lost the land, they lost the sacredness of being with God. They wanted to be older. They wanted to play in the road. Remember, we've talked about all of these things before.
No. Well, we seem to be experiencing some technical difficulty.
You're muted, Jace.
And you disappeared.
Mute. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, sorry, my Facebook disappeared. I think that, my Zoom disappeared. It's the internet here. I have trouble with this all day long. Okay, so the point I was saying is that we all want to jump into the road before it's the right time for us to jump in the road. You remember that from the kids, right? They want that. So now the choices of Israel have led to them, to their own people killing each other.
It's going to disconnect again, I think, Jay.
Literal, although there is.
There we go again.
You guys hear me?
Do you have somebody that has a hotspot maybe on their phone that would work better, or no?
I don't even know. Sorry.
It's okay.
Need to find a better place to do this or actually get internet that works here. All right. You can hear me right now, right?
Yes.
Okay. If it happens again, somebody's looking to set me up with hotspot, but I don't know what that means. I know what it means, but I don't know how to make it happen. So
we just did it last week with JB's phone.
Yes, but I was there present with you and somebody else did it for me. I'm not there. So, all right. So the point was, remember, the shepherd kings are destroying their own people. They're not being the pastors. That's the pastoral part of pastors, right? They're not being shepherds to the people. There they are. They're sitting in their exiled land, far from the pleasure of God. And remember, there's the little ones, Avraham and Abdiel, I think I called them, right? The little ones that are listening to the story. Okay, so if you're new here, you need to realize that we think, when I say we, I basically mean me, the royal we, right? We think that this text comes from much later in time than the story itself. So that is, it's coming from the time of the exile. Now, the original story, maybe not, but the story you're looking at now comes from that time. So the question that we're asking hermeneutically is, why is somebody telling us this story for people during the exile, people on the Chebar River, people who are struggling at that time? Yeah, and I just heard somebody ring the bell too, but yes, that's their problem. All right, so they have heard, Abraham and Abdiel, little kids, they've heard all about creation at this point, because whoever's writing the creation story is telling it for those people hundreds of years later. Okay, that's really important to this whole thing. Remember how, let's go back and do a little bit of hermeneutics work, because we've got new people here and because it's always fun for you to laugh at my whiteboard, right? There is the event. Wow, that's really bad. Just trust me, it's there. And then there's the author. Okay. So here we are over here at the church, and we are studying, and we always seem to look at the event, what happened. That is, Cain kills Abel. When the reality is, we should be asking, what is the author telling us that story for? Why does he insist on telling it to us? What is he trying to get his audience, maybe as much as 1,000 years later, to think about? Okay, so this is the author, the writer, the writer, the document, the audience. Who is the audience? And I'm arguing that audience is Israel in exile. So much later. So if we trace Cain and Abel all the way back to time, as if it's a historical thing that actually happened, which it very well might be, if we do, we're talking about something like Moses is probably, I mean, where would we place that? 1,500 years before Jesus. Okay, maybe if you're more of a progressive in that, 1,250 years before Jesus. But the exile is 500 years before Jesus, or 600. Okay, between 706 and 586. So there are also all of these other interpreters. Okay, they're going to go back and they're going to decide, they're going to figure out what the author is looking at, right? And then, or what the author is thinking, and they're going to transport for people of their time. And then it's the us. Only then can we apply this text to us. If we've gone through the event, the author, the others, and the us. Travis, if you copy this down and make fun of me on Facebook, I'm not going to be a happy person. All right. So, everyone like my white? You can all see it there? Just nod your head. Okay. Let me. Yeah. So they, okay, nobody, so I am talking, but nobody knows I'm talking.
We can hear you now.
Can you guys? Okay. Where did you hear me say? Did you hear me talk about creation?
No.
Oh boy. All right.
I lost you back at the cave in Yoda and Luke.
I was just, posting your photo on Facebook.
Uh,
He appears to be lost in thought again.
Yeah. There's lots of deep thinking this time.
give me,
You're gonna have to move this party to McDonald's next time. Okay. Oh, you're like really on. Well. He's down here. Oh, where'd he go? He's up here.
can you see me now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm very sorry. I'm on a hotspot now, so maybe this will be better. And nice to see all the additional people that have joined since then. Hopefully we won't have as many problems, but hi everyone. Okay, so I assume that you saw the whiteboard.
If you want to back up, we could just gonna back up. You know, I'm just saying.
Of course we can. You did copy it. Thank you for that. You're a wonderful person. Yeah, so anyway, okay, so creation, right? So we're telling little Avraham and Abdiel, these little kids during the exile, they're wondering about how we're here. Why are we in exile? What's going on? And so we're going to tell them this creation story. Well, little Avraham, well, little Abdiel, let me tell you, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then he's going to tell this story. Okay, now you're thinking, how does that have anything to do with what's going on in the exile? Well, we did that. You got to go back and read all of those or listen to all of those particular things. But it's talking about how the gods were fighting against one another. The supernatural powers, chaos, the chaos monster was there, but God made order. God made all things right. That's the goal, is this creation of this place, this sacred place where God and man are going to dwell together. And he fights the forces of darkness. So Israel / Adam, remember, they're the same idea here. Adam means humanity. In this case, we're talking about Israel, might have a land in which they can live and prosper. And it's the same battle that will again rise up when Jesus confronts the devil later on, right? It's these supernatural forces, the war with the devil. That's Genesis 1. Genesis 2 and 3 is this war against false prophets, right? This talking snake. We've all figured out that talking snakes are not real things, right? They don't have vocal cords. There's no way they can talk unless God is somehow miraculously doing that. I don't know why God would do that with a snake, so it doesn't make a lot of sense, but maybe Satan has overpowered the snake and given him vocal cords. I don't know, all that weird stuff. You're not supposed to be asking any of those questions though, right? You're supposed to be seeing this, just like Avraham and Abdiel, these little kids are seeing it. They understand snakes don't talk. They understand that, that these are false prophets in the temple that are in the sanctuary, in the place where God dwells, that are leading them in the wrong direction. Trying to bring down God's good creation. The serpent lies to them, just like the prophets of the monarchy, just like the prophets all the way up through that have lied to them, and they believed them, and so they were killed, right? Just like God said, if you eat of this tree, then you will surely die. And they do die. That is, they're removed from the garden. That's called death. All throughout the prophets, when you're exiled, that's the same thing as saying that you're dead. You're outside of the pleasurable existence of God. So, and the world continues to lie to us today, right? So this is a story of every man. This is not just of Israel, it's of Adam, of humanity. We all have the same problem. So it promised, like the world promised us today, right? Just watch a commercial for 2 minutes, right? It's constantly lying to us. Here are good things. And you can have these good things without going through the suffering. Right? This is a constant thing that I'm trying to get into my head and that a couple of you are regular in trying to help me get into my head, right? That you have to go through the hardships for God to use you in the way he wants to use you. And I still don't seem to get that. I get it in my head, but I don't get it in my heart yet. So, but it's constantly happening, right? Use this credit card. If you just use this credit card, everything's going to be great. And then you realize, oh, crud, I have to pay these back later on, right? It's that constant story. I need to have more than my parents did. I should have a nice apartment, as soon as I get out of high school. It doesn't work that way. You're going to have to sit on, boxes and use the, I don't know, a floor as your bed for a little while, and then you can afford a bed. Right? Most of us are grown-ups now. We realize we've gone through that time, but we see our kids who think they should have as much as us. They shouldn't, right? They've got to go through that spot. So God is at war in all of these passages with the devil, with the world. And you see that in the New Testament, right? That this war that continues against the devil and the world. All right, so Genesis 4, that's what we've been trying to get to. The story of Cain and Abel. But less a story of a war between siblings as it is a war with self. This is what I want us to focus on, at least today, with our own desires, with the lusts of the flesh. Remember the lust of the flesh, the devil, the pride of life. Remember all that stuff from the New Testament? So back up. Things started off okay. Everything was good. God ordered the cosmos for his people. He gives his people everything they could ever want, a virtual land of milk and honey, he calls it. But they refuse to follow God in this land, this garden. And so they get removed from the land, the Garden of Eden. And things can't be any worse. It's as bad as it can possibly be. So the plan for history that God has had all this time has totally been undone. God was hoping for something, and mankind has messed it up. Israel / Adam is unable to do its job as king. Remember, they're called to be priest kings, and they failed. They do not represent God the way they're supposed to represent God. And so a guard is put there to block the garden, to block the presence of God. And what we want to know, what Abdiel and Avraham want to know is this going to continue, right? How do we get out of this mess? They've undone creation. Like the creation that was good is now terrible. How will we ever, can we get it redone? Can we start over again? Okay, now, of course, we know God, right? You guys have had some experience with this God, and he's not thwarted by his creation, despite the fact that they think they can thwart him sometime. His plan is bigger than they can possibly comprehend. And so we get to Genesis 3:15, God speaking to that serpent, to that false prophet, to the Nachash that we talked about, the seraph from last time. He's speaking to them and he's condemning him. And he says, I will put enmity. This is a very famous line. We call it the proto-evangelium, right? Or the first gospel. I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed, and he shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. Okay, yes, and you did the thous and these this time because I wanted to do it in its original glory. If it was good enough for St. Paul, the King James Version, then it's good enough for me, darn. So, okay. Actually, that was the American Standard Version. Paul probably used that. All right, so now we have these two lines, right? Those of you who are new here should notice that everybody's smiling. They recognize, they know what I'm doing. They know I'm just messing around. So sorry, everyone. Okay, so we got these two lines. Enmity is created, or enmity within this created universe now. So Israel has been fully united. Everything has been great. And now not. It's been disunified. Now it's going to battle within itself. The unity of the kingdom is going to be destroyed. We can bring this into the church, and we will for the second half of this. I've got a whole lot of plans for application. But there's going to be a split. Israel itself is going to split into two. But hear this, the serpent seed will do damage, right? But the seed of the woman is ultimately going to destroy the serpent. So we've got a future hope. There's something happen. False prophets are going to come and they're going to bring ruin to the kingdom, but ultimately this kingdom will reign. The king is going to ultimately reign. Something that's good is going to happen. There's hope. Who's going to bring the hope? Who's going to restore creation to its rightful place? That's when we get to chapter 4 of Genesis. Okay, that's what they're wondering, because everything has gotten messed up in chapter 3. They've been kicked out of the garden. Now what? That's where they're supposed to be. That's where you're supposed to put yourself in the story. Cain is born. Chapter 4, verse 1. His name is Cain, which Hebrew is very close to the word acquire or get, right? That is, I have acquired him. I have gotten him from the Lord. Like some people translate it as like, this is him. This is the one that I've acquired. This is the guy. So we're wondering when the seed of the woman is going to come that's going to fix everything, put everything right, restore creation. And Eve says, I've acquired him, right? This is the guy. Like we've been waiting. Wow, he's got it. My son, he's going to put everything back. Everything's going to be good. But what we're going to find out is instead of being the son to restore creation, he's going to choose the wrong path, right? He's going to choose the tohu vabohu. He's going to choose the path towards tehom, the abyss, the uncreation. He's going to go backwards. He's going to befriend the chaos monster or the Nahash, right? The serpent of the sea that comes out. Later is going to be called the slithery serpent, the Leviathan. Later to be called the beast and the dragon in Revelation, right? He's going to make friends with this, the false prophet. But it's not obvious, right? In fact, it's the most subtle thing ever in this story. It's not even spelled out in the Bible. Like verse 2 says, later she gave birth to his brother Abel. Now Abel kept flocks and Cain worked the soil. Okay, very normal, perfectly normal story here. So Cain's a farmer, Abel's a shepherd, no problems. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. Again, nice job. Offerings are good, right? Fruit offerings are good. Don't think anything bad about fruit offerings. They're perfectly fine. You might start asking questions like in Genesis 4, why is there an offering at all? Like who introduced the ideas of offerings or sacrifices in any kind of way? But remember, this is a story for Avraham and Abdiel, not for Cain and Abel. Okay, go back. It's not about the event. It's about the larger, the author, what he's doing. They're not going to ask questions about why there's sacrifices. They've been doing sacrifices since they were born and since their parents and grandparents were born and for millennia already. Okay, this is just part of their everyday life. Of course, they're doing sacrifices. So here's where it gets messy. Verse 4. But Abel brought fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. And the Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering. Now, why did God look with favor on Abel? Does he like veal better than vegetables? I mean, I'm sure he does. He's God, and who would choose vegetables and fruits over nice lamb? But or was there something deeper? Is there something in the heart of these particular sacrifices? It's subtle, but it seems like there's something there in the heart, right? And you can see it in the text, and I'm sure you've been in enough sermons to know that there's something going on in Abel and Cain's heart. Abel brought the fat portions of his firstborn. Cain brought some of his fruits. It's a little tiny thing. Fat portions, some of. There seems to be something in the heart there that Abel gave his best and Cain maybe didn't. But we don't really know what's happened. We're not even given the full story as to why God has chosen one over the other. Sometimes God just chooses the secondborn over the firstborn. We talked about that last week, right? Sometimes that's just what happens. And we're not supposed to try and figure it out because there's a deeper story going on here. God's not pleased. So here's the key to the continuing story. So Cain was very angry and his face was downcast. And the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what's right, will you not be accepted? But if you don't do what's right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must master it. Okay, so you must master it. So from here on, Cain's going to take his brother. You know the story. He's going to kill him. And I've said this isn't a story about sibling rivalry. If it was, we could go into some Star Wars kinds of stuff, with Luke pulling Leia's hair or something like that. And the fact that they made out during one of the movies, we'll just try and put that out of our mind. Like George Lucas did not know what was going on yet. It's just a little weird. But it's not about that. It's not about sibling rivalry. It's about themselves, this deep thing that's going on in their heart. Okay, it's about being children of wrath. It's about the foregone conclusion of what happens when we listen to the false prophets in the world and follow in the footsteps of our parents, when we follow the lusts of our flesh more than the glory of God and the good of others. So here's what's happening. The second generation is choosing to go the same direction as the first generation is going. Okay, listening to the false prophet. Go ahead, Travis.
Dan says that for me, this is another example of die to self and how difficult that is.
That's exactly, and that's what we're going to get to. We're going to get to how this applies to us, not too far actually. But let's stay on the text just for a few more minutes here. Okay, so if Cain does what is right, he's going to be accepted. But sin is there trying to master him, right? The beast, the animal is there. It's crouching by the door. So you get the animal-like idea. It's getting ready. It wants to pull him in. So the battle is within Cain. What should I do? Should I follow this desire, this frustration that I have towards my brother? Or should I master that? So it's, if we want to go literary, we go to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right? That's a story about somebody wrestling with both sides of himself. The good one who wants to take care of people and the one who wants to kill people, right? And we all have that deep within us, this desire to kill, okay? I've told you, I think scripture is largely about that desire. It's about this violence that comes in all of us, okay? So Cain is faced with this choice, just like his parents are faced with this choice. Should I do what God has called me to? Should I do what is right? Or should I go in the direction that I feel like I should go in? Okay, should I eat the fruit, even though I've been told not to? Or should I do what feels right? Should I, I see it, it looks good to the eyes. So it says he sees it, he takes it, and he eats it. This is what Cain has done too. He sees that out there, he seizes it, he destroys. Okay, it's screaming out for these little kids. It's screaming out to Israel, stop following the ways of the world. Stop listening to the false prophets around you. Stop listening to the world, the flesh, and the devil. Right? New Testament thing there. But that's what's going on way back here. Follow God. Following any other path leads to death, literal and metaphorical. Okay, death as in outside the pleasure of God, but also death. Okay, this is where we're going to go. So the Cain and Abel story, which I'm trying to make my point, is that this is the story of Israel in miniature. It's a micro Israel story, just like Adam and Eve was, just like the book of Proverbs is a micro Eden story, right? Which way will this child go? Is he going to go towards foolishness or towards wisdom? What's going to be the choice? He's going to go to either one of these women. Okay? They both look hot. They both mix their drinks well. Proverbs is very clear that they both have all the same things. I'm just telling you, that's what Proverbs says. This boy is on this crossroads and he sees these two women and they're seducing him. The question is, which one will you be seduced by? Okay, and ladies, if you want there to be super hot guys up there, I don't know is it Tom Selleck for some of you, depending on your age, Brad Pitt, Matt Damon, I don't know, Ryan Reynolds. Okay, whatever it is, your picture of it is, it's whoever's seducing. Wait, everybody's microphone's like, okay, we're ready to add in right now. Everybody's like, I need to talk now. Let me tell them who I think the hottest person is. Okay, so, all right. So remember Proverbs. I mean, this is what's happening here in the very first chapter of Proverbs, verses 1 through 7. We talk about like how great wisdom is. Like we gotta choose wisdom. And by the way, chapter 31, right, is the ending of that. It's not about a Proverbs 31 woman. It's about wisdom. It's about being wise. So it's a Proverbs 31 man, Proverbs 31 woman, doesn't matter. The point is that it's a bookend, an inclusio on this book. So the first 7 verses are about how great wisdom is. And then it gets into the section in verse 10 about warning not to give in to sin. And specifically in verse 11 in Proverbs, it says that their sinners will try to entice you, saying, come with us, let us lie in wait for blood, let us wantonly ambush the innocent. Right? And you're just thinking, okay, this is the first chapter of Proverbs. Like, there's a lot of things we can talk about in wisdom versus foolishness. 1,000 sins that can be listed here. This poor kid in the book of Proverbs is told to be careful of murder right up front. Like, people are going to grab you and they're going to say, hey, let's hide here. Let's crouch by the door. And when they come out, we'll kill them. Right? What's going on there? Like, they're grabbing hold of ideas from Genesis chapter 4, Proverbs is. Because both Proverbs story and Genesis 4 story are stories of Israel's undoing. Be wise, follow God's commands, and you get life. Or be foolish, reject God's commands, and you get death. Right? It's about death and life. This is Deuteronomy. It's all about life and death. So here are the exiles. They're exiled from the garden, Adam, Cain, and Abel, exiled from the sanctuary, from the temple, from the land of Israel. And this is just the beginning. Now Cain, okay, so Adam is outside. Now Cain is going to travel even farther from the garden. We're going to get further away from the sanctuary, far from the faithfulness of God. He's going to settle east of Eden with the people of Nod. Okay, he's distancing himself from God now. Remember, just to remind you of the last week and the week before that, okay, remember, this isn't a story, for those of you who are new, this isn't a story about a pristine couple that begin in reality, in real space and time. Or let me try this differently. Let me say it differently. It's not merely that story. That's not the point of the story. If that is anything to do with the story, that's not the main point that's trying to get across here. There are lots of other people in the world, okay? Because Cain is afraid they're going to kill him, right? After he kills his brother, he's afraid that other people are going to kill him. And so God does something for him. That there must be other people. Cain's not like, I imagine there might be other people and they might kill. He's aware of other people in the world, right? He's just set apart from those people in a special way that he's supposed to be representative of God for the rest of the world. So now he's going to go out to the rest of the world and he's going to be a representative in some way. He's some kind of marking to protect him, but he gets further and further away from God's place, from where God is. So, and he gets married there. So here's the one that Eve expects to be the next guy, right? The one they've been waiting for all this time. And he's not even trying, it seems like, to rebuild creation. Okay, there's maybe some argument that the offerings that they do are right next to the gate, right next to the cherubim. And so maybe they're trying to get back into the garden in some way. They're trying to find a reprieve, but Cain messes that up. So anyway, so we have two different directions Israel's going to go. Is Israel going to go greedy, selfish, lie in wait for others, feed off of others, right? Like the kings have been doing for a long time. The line of the serpent, the line of Cain, Israel that's not truly Israel, or are they going to follow the right path? So Israel has this battle within. Remember, they're in the exile. They know how they got there. The false prophet has robbed them of the beauty of the sanctuary. Okay, they know what's happened. Are they going to accept the rule of God and the journey as dictated by God? Or are they going to jump ahead and do whatever they want? Are they going to jump into the road before they're ready to be in the road? Are they going to let God be their king? Or are they going to jump in with a king like all the other nations, for instance? Remember when they choose Saul? Okay, are they going to, will King Ahab gain greatness by worshiping other gods? Which is what he does. Would King Ahaz listen to Isaiah's plea not to survive with the help of Egypt, but just to rely on God? They're going through their history, right? Their history is the series of choices. What kind of person / kingdom will we be? Is Manasseh, the great king, is he going to choose to obey? Or, as 2 Kings says, will he shed so much innocent blood that he fills Jerusalem from end to end? Okay, that's a pretty horrible thing to be said about a king. Okay, are these brothers going to continue to kill their brothers? Is this making sense? So the brother story in Cain and Abel is the brother story of Israel. Are we going to continue to destroy ourselves even after we've received the knowledge of the truth of good and evil? You know, they receive Torah and yet they still don't follow it. They choose to ignore it, and it gets worse. because the Cain story is just like this one miniature thing, but then it gets to the next step, right? His great-great-grandson Lamech, the anti-king, Melech spelled differently, right, is a murderer times 7. So again, you think Cain's special? I killed 7 times that. It keeps getting worse throughout. Now, meanwhile, Seth is born, right? So Seth is the next child to Eve, and he has children. And according to 426, they call on the name of the Lord. So we still have these 2 lines going, okay? Israel and Israel, but good Israel and bad Israel, like, which is the same Israel, because we're going to bring it to ourselves in a second. So what kind of people? This is the story around the campfire. Abraham and Abdiel, what kind of boys and girls will you be? Are you going to follow the kings of Israel who destroyed people? Or are you going to conquer this anger, this violent streak, this bestial part of you? And this is us, right? And this comes right into the New Testament. We're drawn by the devil, the flesh, the world to become children of anger. How do we beat that? That's what Ephesians 2 is about, right? Ephesians 2 says, but God, being rich in mercy. Remember all that stuff? But God, loving us while we're still wrestling in our sin, it says. God loved us while we're still doing that. He gives us grace. James does the same thing. Remember James? Some of you have listened to me preach through James before. I just really badly want to do that again as soon as I have a great place to do that. If any of you lacks wisdom, remember it's all about wisdom. If anybody lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to him. But when he asks, he must believe and not doubt, because he who doubts is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. That man shouldn't think he'll receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man. That's going to be a key phrase. Double-minded man, unstable in all he does. And a few verses later in James, each one is tempted when, by his own evil desire, he is dragged away and enticed. Does this sound at all like the Cain and Abel story? It's dragged away and enticed. Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it's full grown, gives birth to death. Right? So it's all heading back to the same thing. That's what comes when we don't have wisdom, death, or we don't trust in God. We become double-minded, going back and forth, and eventually it results in death. Romans 7. Okay, since we're in New Testament anyway, Romans 7, which we all think is a picture of us and our own struggle. It's really a picture of Israel's struggle, okay, with itself. And how similar it is to the Cain and Abel story, though, right? It is this Cain. Cain is this, throughout other writings, Vermesh talks about this. He's the archetypal possessor of the evil inclination, right? So those are a lot of big words, but you probably understand it, right? He's our paradigmatic. He's the guy that we look at for being the example of what an evil inclination is. So,
he's a scapegoat. I'm just
no.
kidding.
And that's what Paul's leading us to here in Romans chapter 7. Sin is lurking at Cain's door. He should master it, just as Paul summarizes Israel's battle with, I want to do right, but an evil lies close at hand, right? Evil's there, like, I want to do right, but right at the edge of the door, there's evil crouching there, and it's going to grab me and pull me in, right? It's seducing me, just like the Proverbs story, pulled out by the other people. Let's lie in wait and shed innocent blood. And Cain, in so many different traditions, is the double-minded man that we just read about in the book of James. He's the double-minded man with 2 hearts, like from Romans 7. And what you need to do is you need to look in the Symmachus translation, which no one cares about, in the Greek version, to find that James 1:8, that double-minded man, is the same thing in Genesis chapter 4, verse 12, the same word in the Symmachus translation. So, and this is they're just grabbing hold of these old ideas from Genesis. Cain is portrayed in the Targums. Targums are Aramaic translations or Aramaic interpretations / translations, because they add a lot sometimes. And Cain is portrayed there as having an argument with Abel about the justice of God. That's when he kills Abel, right? Which is what the book of Romans is about. It's an argument about the justice of God. So you think Paul's probably jumping back to that kind of stuff. Cain pretends to be ignorant regarding what he's done to Abel, right? Like, I don't know where he is, you know, am I my brother's keeper kind of thing? And that's the same kind of thing that Romans 7 kind of implies if you read the language there pretty carefully. And Cain is under constant threat of death. And Paul says, wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death? So anyway, my point is that Romans 7, I think Paul is riffing off of Genesis chapter 4 there. And there are so many connections. Read Tom Wright's book, Climax of the Covenant, if you want to see a whole bunch of those connections. Very interesting stuff. So here we have two sides of Israel. I got only a few minutes here. Two sides of every man, two sides of Israel, two sides of Adam, two sides of Cain and Abel, two sides of all of us. Israel at a crossroad. Which way are they going to go? The generation before, Adam and Eve, fall under the allure of having what it is that they want when they shouldn't have it yet. What will the new generation do? Here they are, the new generation, sitting on the Kebar River, right? Following, are they going to follow in the footsteps of their forefathers who got them to this place in the exile? Right? Remember, Cain and Abel's 1,000 years before this exile, if it's a historical event, at least, right? How that they're there now. Manasseh, King Ahab, King Ahaz. These are the kings that have messed everything up for them. Are they going to be like their fathers, or are they going to go to the next step? Are they going to choose wisely? Are they going to be like the shepherd kings who stole the land, killed the people, like Ahaz and Naboth and all that? Or are they going to lie in wait for innocent blood? Are they going to cheat their neighbors? Are they going to ignore the prophets? Right? That's what the second half of the Old Testament's about. All those things happening. Are they going to give in to their dark side? If we want to go back to Star Wars language.
You were going to talk about death. It's like a daily reprieve. We're dying daily to that dark side.
Yes. And
Dying to death.
Yes, we have to die to death. Yeah. I haven't even tried to bring it down to us quite yet, but yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, we're dying to ourselves. And so many stories are about this. Look at just in literature, if you don't want to deal with Star Wars or Spider-Man, which are better than most literary works, but still, there's some good stuff out there. Like Les Mis is this 1,600-page story of Javert chasing after Jean Valjean because of his battle with himself. It's not really about Jean Valjean. I mean, right? It's really Javert's desire and his own struggle with himself. Moby Dick is not about hunting a whale. That's a fun story, but that's not the point of the story. It's his own battle with hate. And in fact, a lot of people say that the whale is God, and this hatred, the hatred likely is flesh. Captain Ahab himself. Well, he's supposed to be you, right? In the story of you and God. I'm not going to. I quoted some stuff from Moby Dick, but what? I don't know. Too literary for me.
Give you like 5 minutes, and you said you hadn't got to the application, and you were talking a little bit about it, and Dan had the whole point about dying to self, and then also recently learning forgiveness first, and anger is mitigated, and wisdom.
All right, fine. I will do without this whole page of awesome Star Wars references that I have here. I did a lot of work here to make this fun for you, but no, we want to apply it to ourselves. So, fine. Are they going to listen to God and righteous, or will they go the path of the world? I just skipped a whole page for you, Travis. Thanks a lot.
I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just letting you know where we're at.
All right. So here's the struggle. Let's bring it to ourselves. That's inside of us every day, right? This dark side struggle. Like, we understand the struggle. It's why we read Romans 7 as if it applies to us specifically, even though it's about Israel. It's because it's our struggle. We know what we want to do, and we don't do it. Like, we do what we don't want to do, and we don't do, whatever that's our constant struggle. And we seem like we have no way out. We're constantly dealing with that. And sometimes you have that out-of-body experience where you look down at yourself and you're like, what is wrong with you? Stop acting that way towards your husband or your wife or your kids. And you still just keep doing it. Like, you're working out in the garage and your kid is coming and bugging you, and you're just like frustrated as can be. And, and maybe they're not bugging you. They're having the sibling rivalry. We'll keep it together, right? With all that stuff. And they're just doing their normal whining and stuff and they just walked in at the wrong time. You're frustrated. You look down on yourself, like from above, and you can see what you're about to do. Like you're just getting, it's just, it's like this evil influence is on you and you know you're going to do it. You're like, I have this moment. I can stop myself. I can stop. And then you don't, right? You just jump right in there filled with wrath, your face all contorted. You can see yourself doing it and you keep doing it. But at least, okay, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just admitting it far too much, but I saw some nods going on there. My point is the dark side's strong, isn't it? It's really strong. Like we know our time is up. Those of you with kids, I'm looking around. Yep, a bunch of you guys have kids and little kids in there. We know our time is up on the computer, but mom and dad aren't watching, right? So we're going to go ahead and keep going and pretend that we didn't know our time was up. That's that evil inclination. We know we're not supposed to watch that movie, but they're watching the movie and we're not at mom and dad's house, and it's probably okay to watch it. Or it's just a casual conversation at work. You know your wife wouldn't be happy with the amount of time you spend and some of the things you said. You didn't do anything actually wrong, but you're not necessarily telling her or him about that. It's harmless, right? It's not that big of a deal. And it's not like she's really going to find out. And even if she found out about this time that you talked, it's not, I mean, by itself, it's not that big. Or that tax write-off is not technically permitted, but it's not like you have a chance of being audited. Let's be honest. I mean, it's not like you make enough money that anybody's going to care. It's just a little fudge, and it's only a few dollars. Dark side is very powerful. It has no authority, Christians, right? It has no authority, but it is very powerful. I think it was Chesterton said, if a rhinoceros is to enter into the restaurant, we would all agree that it has a lot of power, but I'd be the first one to tell it that it has no authority there, right? I mean, it's got power. It's destroying plates. Everything's getting knocked over and stuff like that. That sounds like a Chesterton quote. I'm pretty sure it was him. So our dark side is pushing us around, but we can't let it. We must master it. So how? How do we master it? So here's my final few seconds. There's a book called The Enemy Within. It's by Chris Lundgaard. It's a pretty short book, and I'm pretty sure that it is a summary of something that Owen wrote about the same thing, the Puritan Owen. But I think there's a huge niche if anybody ever wants to do this. Take a Puritan book and make it readable for people today, because they have wonderful things to say, but they say it in 4 billion pages. It would be nice to say the same thing in about 20, right? Or 100. Just get the point, for crying out loud. These little nuggets are too hard to find. So anyway, he says this. Here are his suggestions. Keep watch against sin's deceit. It tells you that it isn't that big of a deal. After all, are you your brother's keeper? But it leads to death. Sin deceives us. It's these little things. It's not that big of a deal, but it is, right? It starts small and it gets bigger and bigger. Mitigate against its controlling nature. It's crouching at the door, but you must master it. You must master it. Fill your affections with heavenly things. And I would add, if you do what is right, will you not be accepted? Right? Just to stick with our Genesis kind of thing. So fill your affections with heavenly things. Whatever is pure, whatever is noble, whatever is good. Remember that? Think on these things. Renew your first love with Jesus. And I'd add, don't just bring out some of your offerings to him. Bring out the fatty portions, the best. And what are we called to sacrifice? Romans chapter 12. Present yourselves as sacrifices. Hunger for a glimpse of God's holy glory. This is again Lundgaard. He says, long for God's holy glory. I don't know that we really long for that enough. And he ends with, meditate on the cross to see the rottenness of your sin and the fullness of Christ's love. And I would add that that's the heel, that the heel has struck the serpent for sure. We don't have to give into the dark side anymore. The cross has done it. It has conquered that. We don't have to allow that rhino, Chesterton's rhino, free reign. Genesis 3:15 has come to pass, not in Abel, not in Cain, not in Seth, but in Jesus, which is pretty important to this one that comes to conquer sin and live and allows us to live lives of righteousness. So do you have any other suggestions?